Hi, it's David Duffett here, Worldwide Community Advocate for Signalwire, and I'm delighted to be doing a ClueCon Weekly this week with Chad Hart. Hi, Chad. How are you doing?
Hi, David. Yeah, thanks. I'm delighted to be back for ClueCon Weekly. It's been a while.
You're a bit of a veteran, aren't you? You've been on ClueCon Weekly.
A couple times, yeah. I'm overdue, so it's good to be here with you in the new format too. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you along. And the last time I saw you face to face was at the Kranky Geek conference in San Francisco.
Yeah, that was good. And I should say, maybe to start out, we actually did confirm the next event will be happening on Friday, November 20th, which is got confirmation. So, well, hopefully I'll see you there again next year. Happy to talk about more of that event too.
Yeah, top class. And can you just remind folk of the website they should go to learn more about Kranky Geek?
Krankygeek.com with a K, Kranky, geek.com.
Great stuff.
I didn't make up the name. I came in a year after they had started that, but it's memorable. So
it sure is, and it's a great event. I really enjoyed it. It was my first one last year.
Oh yeah,
I'm really pleased to go along. Now, Chad, I know there's a lot of things you could talk about in the realms of WebRTC and AI and stuff like that. But before we get into that, do you think for folks that have perhaps not met you just yet, you could give a bit of a background in terms of your sort of career in the world of comms? We were talking earlier and you talked about NMS. I remember Natural Microsystems from back in the day. I think it's Bruff Turner's company.
It was, yeah. Bruff is a good guy. Haven't talked to him in a while now, but yeah, I for better or worse, I've been in telecom communications my entire career. I started actually as an intern at NMS and haven't been able to get out. It keeps pulling me back in one way or another there. So yeah, I was at NMS for a while. I worked at a regional wireless company. I was an industry analyst. Kind of got me into the more marketing kind of industry analytics side of things, that understanding what's going on in the industry. And then I've done a lot of product marketing, product management work for companies like Empirics, which does like test monitoring for VoIP and telephony. I was at Acme Packet for quite a while over there, through when they got acquired by Oracle. When WebRTC started taking off, I went off to Dialogic for a little while, which actually, since Dialogic purchased NMS, kind of brought me back into all the boards and some of the infrastructure there. But WebRTC, I continue to get a lot of requests to help people out on various different projects, and I decided to eventually go out on my own and do independent consulting at the same time. Launched a little startup doing WebRTC stuff around Jitsi and co-turn kind of turn projects. The consulting side of things really picked up for me. So did that for a while. Voxbone was one of my clients that actually asked me to come on board and run a new product incubator for them, which was a lot of fun and help be part of a spokesperson. They're big, advocates of open source. That my whole group, everything we did was open source. So part of that was actually going out in community. That's where we talked a bunch of times at various different events, AstraCon and ClueCon, just to help support the open source community there. So that helped to get me more and more involved in open source, and since then I've continued kind of along that path of in consulting work. Recently, I've been a lot of always been focused a lot on WebRTC, but in the last couple of years or so, I've been getting a lot more focus to AI and RTC topics, which includes doing things like computer vision with video feeds, like WebRTC video feeds, speech analytics, doing speech to text, analyzing that, and especially a lot around voice bots in this intersection of using a lot of the speech technologies and AI assistance as part of phone calls and sort of telephony.
Great stuff. Yeah, I mean, AI, machine learning, very, very much hot topics at the moment. I've just come from IT Expo and Open Source World down here. In fact, I'm still in the hotel room here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And our best attended session was the one about voice bots, machine learning, and AI. That was packed the room. That was Diego Gosma from Xenia Labs, ex-Kelly. But just before we get on to the technologies that you're currently involved in, just going back, without going too deep, you've been involved in some amazing technology, because if you go back to NMS, that would be back in the days of the boards. Were we talking ISA or PCI back in those days?
Yeah. PCI, I mean, I'm not that old, but PCI was a new thing, pretty new. It was mostly ISA stuff. I was working. Right.
So really, you've been involved since.
Yeah, and to be fair, I was an intern. I went from there to a VoIP startup, actually. So that's when I first got involved in voice over IP. This was pre-SIP, so HC23, like SIP was a roadmap item that, like, all right, we're gonna have to do the SIP thing. But then, back then with a bubble burst, I never got to that. But that was one of my first experiences, like right out of school.
Yeah, amazing. So you've been. I mean, it's very fair to say you've been in telecoms, but you've been in computer telephony for.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, being in VoIP, I mean, it gave me a taste for like the bleeding edge new stuff, and I kind of not wanted to deviate too far away from that. So I've been fortunate where I've been able to work with a lot of or been able to continue working with a lot of the bleeding edge technologies and new stuff. That's what I really enjoy.
Yeah. So, Chad, I think that I can't think of anybody better qualified to talk about the current state of WebRTC. So could we talk a little bit about that first, and then we'll move on to the machine learning, the AI, and the bots?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can think of lots of people that are better qualified than me, but I'm happy to be a spokesperson for WebRTC there. In general, it's good, right? From a specs standards perspective, and the 1.0 is done. There's no major open. I mean, there's plenty of little things, but from a developer perspective, just getting started now is a really great time to get into WebRTC, because things are really stable. With one of the big areas, I guess, was just browser vendors and browsers supporting WebRTC. That is in a really good shape too. I mean, at Kranky Geek, we actually had the first ever kind of browser panel, where we actually had the leads, people actually doing the development or in charge of the teams, or in charge of the product at each of the browser vendors, come and talk. And it was great to see them in person, actually coordinate and talk about things and get along with each other. It's not a antagonistic type relationship. They really coordinate together. And then within that, the big news is with Microsoft and Edge, moving the Edge browser from what they had, their proprietary implementation, to using the Chromium stack.
Was that a shock to you, Chad?
Was that a shock? Maybe a little. I mean, I'm still probably jaded from Microsoft for a long time with not changing and trying to force people. But I give Microsoft a ton of credit for being pragmatic and realizing, hey, I liked a lot of their ideas and what they're doing over RTC. But it just, for many different reasons, didn't catch on, and trying to hold on to something that's not working is worse than giving up on something that sounded like a good idea and just trying something else. So I give them a ton of credit with doing something else. And in particular, I think this is going to be really good for the WebRTC community, because currently it's just been Google doing what they want with Chrome. Now having another major stakeholder being able to make contributions and pushing that, I think that actually would be very good for the WebRTC community, because now we're not just beholden to one primary stakeholder. There's not to say there weren't many big stakeholders involved, but having another major one involved, directly involved and contributing code and actually changing things, is a huge deal. So in general, I think everything's great. I'd say even if you don't want to deal with the browsers, it's never been easier. If you're a Go developer, if you're a Python developer, if you're a JavaScript, there's so many great open source libraries out there that you can build from, that are also getting very mature. So in general, maturity has been great. It's just making things easier. Behind the scenes, there are still bugs and issues, but you see things like I just recently wrote a post on perfect negotiation, which is essentially picking some of the, there's a peer peer connection things, and without getting too technical in the details, there's situations where you get glare or when you're trying to connect two sides at once and it falls apart. And these are probably less than a few percentage points when this sort of stuff happens, maybe even a lot less than that, but like there's effort to go and fix and make sure that doesn't even happen, right? So you see the browser vendors working together, improving not only the specs, but also improving their APIs and doing more with interoperability between the browsers to prevent these types of situations, and that's really good. Also on the open source side from Codex, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of this actually have a meaningful impact on WebRTC this year, but you see efforts with codecs like AV1 to get out there. The video codec side of things in particular, where WebRTC has been a little bit of a mess. That's especially relevant to the media server vendors out there and doing mixing, and you want to be able to take advantage of hardware acceleration as much as possible. Google pushed VP8 and VP9. Just the hardware acceleration never really caught on like it did for H.264, which is basically in almost every device. So hopefully that situation will change in the long run with AV1. That's still a ways off, but it's still exciting to say, all right, AV1 is an open source video codec that basically has every major technology provider is behind it. And this is unique compared to something like H.264, which is controlled by a consortium that's pretty much trying to get money out of patents out of people, right? AV1 goes in the open source direction, free to use, no licenses, no restrictions, that sort of thing. And then on the horizon, there's a couple little things, like SVC efforts to just improve standardization around that, make video calling working, and we can go to more technical details on that, but essentially lets you have multi-party video conference calls that work a lot better. And the future, I guess, things like Quick and WebAssembly. Quick is a new transport standard that'll help. Actually very well suited to WebRTC. And WebAssembly lets you be a little more creative. A lot of things you could do things like design and run your own codec in the browser potentially. Some of those things are on the horizon for people who don't necessarily or want to go beyond just what's in the standards or beyond what's in the standard browser implementations and build their own
Yes,
and still get a lot of the performance benefits. So.
And speaking of WebAssembly, you had Sean from Pion at Kranky Geek, who did a talk on WebAssembly, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a great talk. Well, one, I wanted to get at least one major open source project going, and Pion, I'd say in particular, is one of those projects that's really taken off in just a couple of years, and it's a good example of how vibrant the WebRTC community is. Because Sean came in, he wasn't a telephony guy. He went and figured out WebRTC, and he was a Go guy and basically built WebRTC stack in Go, and found this great, started this great project, and now it's like a massive community of people. And I did some analysis. It was top of the list, I guess, of most popular open source WebRTC projects, at least in terms of GitHub, user activity. So it was very excited to have him on and talk about WebAssembly.
Yeah, very, very positive. Just coming back to WebRTC in general and the internals, you said we'd reached version 1.0 and getting a consensus from the browser vendors. Do you think we are leaving the era of things kind of getting broken on a maybe not quite a daily basis, but as browser revisions happen and stuff like that, people have dealt with this for a number of years now?
No. I wish not, but that sort of stuff still happens. I mean, there's still like deprecations. We have things going on like the switch to MDNS, which have unintended side effects. So in most cases, these things aren't surprises, but sometimes people don't pay attention or they get implemented differently than you expect. So I don't expect there'll be zero issues, but for the majority of developers, I don't think they'll need to worry about it. I think for projects like FreeSwitch, right, they'll need to go and continue to test and like make sure they work, dev builds and beta builds and stay on top of things. People using that sort of I think would be a lot less likely to run into issues than they have in the past. Will Anthony still have to worry about things occasionally, like once a year, probably. That won't go away. But I think that's probably true of running almost any technology out there. So overall, I think it's way more manageable than it used to be. And I ultimately, I mean, there's the audience of people out there who are doing like the back end and building the stacks and doing the hard, basically the back end harder builds and building the libraries and frameworks. And then there's your typical browser, web developer. I think things are pretty good for the web developer. I think things have gotten a lot better for the back end people, and it's not zero work. I suppose there's still enough to keep them employed out there, but that's getting better too. But for the web developers, I think it's really pretty painless today.
Yeah, that's good. Just in closing at the IT Expo show on the Open Source World track, the last panel we had was regarding looking into the future of RTC and VoIP in general. And there was a question about WebRTC, but a member of the audience, somebody who you may have come across, one Dan Jenkins, who was sat in the audience, decided he was going to contribute, and he was saying that although things aren't ideal, you can sensibly deploy solutions now on WebRTC that will work both today and tomorrow and into the future. So that's
I mean, and I need to be careful. I mean, I work. Dan's great. I've worked with Dan quite a bit, and others. I mean, you have to be careful because there's those of us that are very deep in the weeds and stuff comes up all the time. It's really frustrating, right? It's like, all right, why are we still dealing with this not happening? But it's important to take a step back and realize, hey, well, you know what? Like, we're dealing with this, but that's a relatively small community of people that have to deal with the nitty gritty. Or somebody brand new starting out that's never worked with telephony before and just wants to make a video call or basically a voice call and set that up with a browser. It's really easy for them to do that, and that's a good thing. And it's never been easier for them to do that, and it seems to only be continuing to get easier for them to do that with fewer problems. So I think as an industry, we've made a lot of progress beyond kind of the core group of telephony people to making this technology available to, there's like 9 million JavaScript developers out there, right? So it's we made this available to the world, and it's gone well.
Very positive. Now, when I first met you, Chad, it was a lot of WebRTC and talking about places like Astracon and ClueCon. But I gather you're more involved in machine learning and AI, that kind of stuff, and bots now. How did that transition occur? How did you find your way into that?
Well, I guess as I've always been interested in, kind of, as I mentioned earlier, some of the bleeding edge type capabilities there. It was as part of the new product incubator, I did a Voxphone. I was explicitly supposed to go after, look at new opportunities like that. In general, from a just computer science perspective, machine learning is kind of the new thing, right? The new paradigm that everyone needs to learn. I think for us here in the telephony industry, it's just how do we apply some of those new computer science techniques? How do they apply to what we do? And since we deal with real-time media, and as always, like real time is always a challenge, right? Because you can't wait. There's no, in most cases, you can't wait, right? You need to do things fast, and it's media. It tends to be intensive. It's a lot tougher than just getting text and doing things. But that being said, there's a ton of opportunities inside communications. The one that's been around the longest that people have been doing is really just speech to text, right? Doing transcription. There's been a lot of strides there, right? So that's not really a new thing, but that's been around. I mean, the little things like just doing speech synthesis, for your IVR aren't necessarily new, but these new techniques are making things a lot better.
Yeah.
I just saw a lot of pieces coming together. That the computer vision pieces, I think, is a little bit newer, especially just video conferencing in general. It's been around for a long time, but the ubiquity of video conferencing for telephony is relatively new, largely because of WebRTC. So that there's new opportunities there. The whole intersection of like voice bots. I mean, we can talk a lot about IVRs and how much I hate IVRs, but the ability to, we get so used to using Siri and Alexa. It reminds me, I need to mute my Alexa here. But we use these devices and you talk to them, and they're sometimes they're pretty dumb, but a lot of times they're not, and they're pretty impressive, and you don't really think about it. And then you get on the phone with a normal IVR, and like, oh, I got to press 2 or 3, and like it doesn't pick it. It's very frustrating, right? So there's a big opportunity to take a lot of these technologies that have been really consumerized and in some ways commoditized, and figure out how to apply them to our open source and to our telephony projects.
Yeah, on the speech to text front, Chad, When we were involved with these things some years ago, it used to be DSPs actually analysing what was said and trying to make sense of it all. But am I right in thinking that now, in this new era of things like Alexa, it's moved away from that, and it's more about big data and comparing what's said to libraries or to large collections of data, and that the actual way we recognise what's going on has changed?
Yeah, I will say in general, large amounts of data and aggregating large amounts of data is critical to any of these processes. If you want to have accuracy, I mean, that's basically the way the machine learning algorithms work. You need a lot of data to make them work. That being said, though, it's kind of been a trade-off where, like, all right, you can certainly do things in the cloud. We have a lot more processing power, bring a lot more to bear, but there's a trend now to actually bring things back on the device in a lot of cases. So like I have a Google Pixel, right? I mean, this has, built in like their TensorFlow processor unit, TPU type technology built into the phone, where actually I can do real-time translation locally, not even connected to the internet, right? Because they've basically optimized the hardware to run that machine learning graph, that library, and run that locally, and shrink it down to make it work. So, and some of that same technology is happening in the browser. Some exciting projects. So even doing computer vision techniques, once you pretty much how to do server side, now with new technologies like the WebAssembly I mentioned, which can basically run C code in the browser, you can run a lot more efficiently and do a lot more interesting things that didn't exist before. So I think these are big opportunities for I think especially the open source community and use cases that aren't going after people that are willing to pay millions of dollars in infrastructure for things where they just want to have something that works pretty well, low cost and be very flexible, right? And there's nothing that's lower cost and more flexible than being able to run something in the browser and not have to pay for it, or not have to pay for a lot of expensive server infrastructure to do that analysis, right? So things like, there's like TensorFlow.js, for example, from Google. I mean, it's a computer vision library there, but it includes computer vision libraries for doing things like facial detection out there, even doing posture or pose detection. I mean, there's a lot of things. Wouldn't it be nice to say, all right, I want to pause. It would be put my hand up, and that's a pause symbol. I mean, you can actually, that's actually very technically possible to do today in the browser. So I think we're at the very cusp of a lot of exciting things. And
where people have been doing analytics on speech, which of course is still, a relatively new technology, looking at sentiment analysis. Of course, it's totally possible to do this on video data as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So, on the speech side, I mean, that the big challenge there is just accuracy. Like, if you don't have much of if you're an English speaker or U.S. American English speaker without much of an accent, it works pretty well most of the time. The technologies, though, like to separate with you and me, it's called diarization. If you actually don't have the speakers on separate channels, or if you're in a conference room, that stuff is getting better. The technologies to identify individual speakers, maybe they'll pull them out, I guess is related to that. So there's a lot of things around these technologies that are important, and also just support of other languages and other dialects is getting a lot better. So I think it makes it from working really well in some scenarios to making it work well in almost all scenarios. And we're piggybacking on top of these smart devices, which are out there, and there's hundreds of millions of them deployed everywhere and used all the time, right? So in a lot of cases, we can piggyback on those data sets and those technologies and get something that works really well for pretty cheap.
Yeah, I think you hit on quite a key point there, because back in the day when you were looking to do speech recognition, you might want to do it on your PC with a high quality microphone. You might get into a lot of training, saying the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog 50 times or whatever. But in the world of telephony, we have to take it on the fly with the crackles and pops and make a best guess. And so that whole ability to tap into a large amount of data is really helpful in that situation.
Yeah, and you see there's still training involved in industry or customer specific training, but you see that being moved up into things like with speech to text, for example. A lot of the major systems have custom vocabularies, right? Where you don't need to train it on the specific waveform. You just tell it, this word VoIP, telephony is likely to show up a lot more. And that way, when it sees something that sounds like that, it's more likely to say, all right, that word's probably telephony, and fix it in there, or that word's VoIP. So it picks it up. And that stuff, I mean, they've made it, at least with Google and like Amazon, and they made it pretty easy to go and implement as part of the APIs. And
we got that ability to kind of filter down with directed dialogue as opposed to completely natural language processing.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, another interesting area, and one that probably has me the most excited of all this stuff is on the more conversational technology out there, because it blends together multiple things, right? So you have to have pretty good speech to text in the first place to understand user inputs. I mean, and everything still at the end of the day is largely, gets converted to text and analyzed that way. But you also have speech synthesis, which has been around for a while, but the new neural models that are being used, they just sound a lot better. They're still figure out they're a robot. I mean, but like just compared to what they were just a couple of years ago, a lot better, and they're affordable and a lot easier to use. And then on top of that, you have this natural language processing type capability to combine those things together and understand user intents, convert those words into actions. I think all that's that's really exciting, and the idea of now being able to have more of a virtual agent, either to supplement or in some cases maybe wholesale replace a live person, or offload the live person. I think is pretty exciting. These dumb IVRs where you just have to press 1 for this and then listen to the menu, press 2, you get out of that and just get on the phone and just say what you want, right?
I think what you're talking about right now, Chad, is like the state of the art, if you like, the intelligent bot.
Exactly.
And so that's where the rubber's hitting the road right now, where the creative people are working in doing these bots, the multi-channel bots that can respond on the website, also bots that can respond in speech. Where do you think things might go next, or things might develop further?
Well, there's still a lot to be done there. I will say it's still a lot of work to program these bots and get them to do what you want to do. You can make them do it, but it's still a lot of steps. It's gotten a lot easier, but I think the process for building a bot will get better, and the bot will get it'll require less training and less specificity over time. Another big area that, Google has a whole contact center AI initiative, but they're not alone. Others are trying to do more agent assist type technology. So if you can have the bot not responding instead of the agent, but actually just listening and coaching the agent, or giving the agent basically here's what it seems the customer problem is, and giving them a prompt what to say or load up the information they need. That's a huge new area, right? That requires the same type of bot technology, but again, it's not focused on communicating with the customer. Instead, it's focused on helping the agent communicate with the customer, right? So a slightly different use case and application. So that's a huge new area that's, I think, still pretty new. That'll have a pretty big impact overall.
You mentioned.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned Google working with a number of companies around the contact center and the kind of telephony connectivity. Of course, one of those that has an official implementation is Signalwire. And I believe you had a little delve into the Signalwire and Dialogflow.
I did, yeah. So my blog, cogint.ai, short for cognitive interactions, but cogint.ai. I reviewed, Signalwire's Dialogflow connector, right? And and among others, right? There's a few people that have done that, but I'll say it's Signalwire and one other that actually show up for CPaaS companies, actually show up in the official Dialogflow integrations directory for adding phone numbers. Yeah, it's a great feature. You can just go inside FreeSwitch. You can really, in a couple clicks, go and add your Dialogflow agent, and then call using Signalwire. Basically, pick your phone number and call in from Signalwire and connect it to your Dialogflow agent. It's super easy. And I hope to see a lot more out of that product. I guess on the integration side. So the features and all the things like that. A lot of what I do on my blog is actually talk about beyond just basic connectivity, like how are basically how is a conversational IVR different than just a normal bot, right? And a normal, text-based bot is different than a voice-based bot. There's things you have to worry about. But then when you move into the telephony realm, and that, kind of that space, that paradigm, and there's some unique things there also, like DTMF. I mean, hopefully you're trying to replace DTMF, but sometimes you still need that as a backup option. I mean, some of the people are, if you're in the middle of a restaurant or somewhere trying to order something, maybe you don't want to speak out your telephone number, wherever, or your telephone number or your credit card number, wherever you hear it, right? So you still want to be able to punch things in. The whole idea of like DTMF input for, some of these voice bots like Dialogflow just doesn't exist, right? So you have to implement that via other means.
Yeah. I was just smiling to myself, thinking the next step backwards from DTMF would be loop disconnect. We don't really want to go there. Chad, now I know you do some consulting, and I was interested to find out, is it your kind of how people end up engaging with you? Are they looking at what you're currently doing in your blogs and thinking we need to talk to Chad, or are you engaged with companies already that kind of lead you off in a certain technological direction?
The reality is it's kind of both. I mean, the blogs and stuff I do are largely me and stuff I want to do, or things that interest me, and I do them, and I hope it does lead to business. So I'd say it's probably a little bit more on that side. But that being said, I mean, I work with clients on those topics, and I learn stuff, right? That's the part of my value as a consultant, is working with many different companies and kind of trying to connect the dots across the industry. So I it's a little bit of both, but I try to lead with the blogs and some of the analysis I do.
Fair enough. And if people want to get in touch with you or find out more about what you're doing, I can see we've got your email address down under your name there. But how else can people get in touch?
Yeah, they can just go to cwh.consulting, which just redirects to my, ChadwellsHart.com page. You can see an anthology, all the stuff I'm working on there, my blogs. But that's they can start there. I have a contact me page.
Good stuff. Now we're coming towards the end of our...
Also on Twitter at ChadwellsHart. If you want to reach me that way, or you can also find the contact page on WebRTC Hacks, WebRTCHacks.com too. So
great. Can you just say the Twitter bit again, because I have a feeling I might have inadvertently spoken over you there.
It's you can go to, my Twitter is at ChadwellsHart. My WebRTC Hacks is WebRTCHacks.com. Cogint.ai is just cogint.ai there, or you can go to cwh.consulting. Great.
Okay, thank you for that. Now we're coming towards the end of our time together, and so I have this question that I asked right near the end, and that is there anything else you'd like to talk about or like to say?
We covered quite a bit. I have lots of questions about FreeSwitch and Signalwire, but I don't think that's probably not the not the forum, not the forum for that. No, I think. Well, I mean, let me look at my notes here. I think we touched on all the. Yeah, I think we touched on everything I cared about talking about.
Maybe what we could do is get a three-way going on and get Tony on as well, and then we could record that, because I'm sure it would be edifying for people. If you've got it as a question, I'm sure other people would have questions.
I do. As a fan of FreeSwitch and Signalwire, I think that would actually make for a pretty interesting, maybe kind of a community office hours type call where people can ask questions, or that actually I think that would be pretty interesting. I definitely would participate in that.
Yeah, okay. I will set about trying to make that happen. In the meantime, Chad, I hope we get to see you at a ClueCon or an AstraCon or whatever live event at some stage soon.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, certainly before, Kranky Geek's not till November, so I hope I see you probably before. Well, hopefully we'll find something before the next ClueCon. I'll be at Enterprise Connect. I mean, maybe that's one.
Okay, yeah, I know that there'll be people there. I'm not sure whether I'll be there myself, but
yeah, sure it's not really open source community there. It's the opposite of the open source community in most cases, but it's not one of the big telecom shows that you have to go to. So.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Chad, for giving of your time and coming along to chat to us. Wish you every success, and hope the right people seek you out for consulting. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a lot of fun.